Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for being here for today's update. We saw parts of Vermont with significant rain and winds yesterday, but overall, we made out better than expected. Although, it appears Rutland and Addison counties were affected the most, with high winds, which led to more power outages compared to earlier this week. The utility crews are working hard and have made a lot of progress since last night. Yesterday, the state unfortunately confirmed its first fatality related to flooding. I want to express my sincere condolences to the Duvall family, Stephen's friends, and my hometown of Barrie for this heartbreaking loss. While we continue to have an eye on the immediate response, we know communities and families are reeling and need our help. So we'll be actively moving on our recovery work as a result. On an individual level, over the next 48 hours, it's incredibly important to get flooded homes, businesses, and public buildings as dry as possible to prevent other outcomes like mold. And we're working on resources to help with that. Dr. Levine is here with us today to talk about health and safety when dealing with floodwaters and responding to the damage it causes. And when it comes to recovery, the federal government continues to be incredibly helpful. On Monday, I'll be welcoming the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, to Vermont, and we'll survey impacted infrastructure and talk about how we rebuild and recover. And as you know, last night I submitted to President Biden a request for a federal major disaster declaration. And I'm happy to say about 20 minutes ago, the President approved that request. So I'm very grateful for the speed of FEMA and the White House. It will open up significant federal resources for communities, individuals, businesses, and the state. We'll have more detailed information on that with a press release on the approval right after the press conference. In anticipation of these funds, we're working to develop a concrete list of resources to help impacted Vermonters and making sure it's as easy as possible for Vermonters to access those. In a few minutes, Secretary Tebbetts will also discuss damage sustained to our farms and resources available to them. Lastly, I've been inspired by the thousands of Vermonters, businesses, and organizations who have reached out wanting to help. As we transition to recovery, we know we'll need all the help we can get. You can sign up to volunteer at vermont.gov/volunteer or with local community organizations. There's a ton of work to do, and impacted Vermonters will need all the help we can provide. I know Vermonters will continue to step up and meet the moment. I'll now turn it over to Commissioner Morrison to give a situational update and report on the recovery work that will soon begin.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, my fellow Vermonters. We are relieved that last night's storms did not bring the full fury that we anticipated. There are areas that were hit quite hard, but we did not receive any calls for evacuation or rescue. Today, we will keep teams staged throughout the state ready to respond to emergencies. You will also see air assets out today, looking for vehicles in waterways or other places that they don't belong. To date, we have performed 202 rescue missions. We've assisted with approximately 100 evacuations and have conducted dozens of vehicle checks to ensure that no one is trapped inside. As of this morning, as the Governor mentioned, there is just the one known fatality associated with this event. Last night, our power outages spiked to around 14,000, but are down to approximately 3,500, and currently the highest number of those outages is in Rutland County. It looks like we will have a day or two of decent weather in most parts of the state. It's going to be easy to think that we're out of the woods, yet several of our communities are still reeling from last night's events. And candidly, the high winds, the rainfall, the thunderstorms complicated an already devastating situation locally in many communities. So please remember our neighbors right now, particularly along the 22A corridor. Towns like Bridport, Shoreham, Cornwall, and Middlebury were hit hard last night. And let's remember that we're all in this together. We're beginning the work of understanding the federal disaster declaration just signed by President Biden this morning. As the governor mentioned, this will open up a variety of streams of funding to assist Vermont individuals, businesses, and municipalities, as well as the state. And we're going to have more details on that very soon. It is important to note that we did not wait for this declaration to summon federal disaster assistance. There have been numerous FEMA resources on the ground here in Vermont since very early this week. Specifically, there are 2 incident management assistance teams, one here in Berlin and one temporarily staged in South Burlington. There are 2 disaster survivor assistance teams, each with 35 people at a staging area awaiting deployment. 1 urban search and rescue incident support team at the Vermont National Guard Armory in White River Junction, plus 2 USAR Type 3 task forces that have been hard at work with our state and local teams for days. There are also 2 disaster emergency communication teams deployed to the EOC in Berlin and 1 in White River Junction. As of 8 o'clock this morning, there are 198 FEMA personnel deployed to Vermont. 132 personnel are already on the ground and 66 more are en route. Now more than ever, it is important that municipalities clearly communicate with state officials. We cannot assist you at the local level if you do not communicate your needs to the Emergency Operations Center. Whatever it is, food, water, transportation, infrastructure, or supplies, please make your needs known so we can start problem solving with you. Because there are 2 to 3 dozen communities that we have not heard from despite our outreach, today we are sending National Guard troops to those communities to establish contact and ensure that every town and city in Vermont knows how to reach the State Emergency Operations Center. And I'd also like to remind homeowners and business owners to report your damages to 211. 211 is the place to call so we can accurately track the magnitude of damages both to individual homes and property and businesses. I'll finish up with just a quick word about the status of state-run shelters. As of 8 o'clock this morning, there were 35 people seeking shelter in Barre, 4 in Rutland, 23 in Johnson, 6 in Ludlow, and 0 in Hartford. With that, I will turn things over to Dr. Levine.
Thanks, Commissioner Morrison. Good morning. I'd like to start today by thanking everyone in this response for working so quickly and so hard to keep Vermonters safe. And to all Vermonters, your willingness to help and take care of one another continues to inspire me and never ceases to inspire me during difficult times. We've had our share of consecutive once-in-a-century events, and you give new meaning to the word resilience. As the governor noted, the Department of Health did report our first and only to date death, a sure tragedy, and we join the governor in extending our condolences to family and community. Now, I know that experiencing property loss of your own, or of your neighbor, or your community, or just the stress and uncertainty surrounding crises like these can take a toll on our mental health. Please recognize that's completely okay and reach out for help if you or someone you know is struggling. In addition to all of our local resources, there is now a national disaster stress hotline that you can call or text for support, 1-800-985-5990. Now, unfortunately, we know that climate change will continue to make severe weather a threat to our world, so it's important to understand how it impacts our health and what we can do in the short and long term to mitigate these impacts. As we all work toward recovering from this disaster, returning to homes and reopening businesses, it's my task today to share some guidance for staying as safe and healthy as possible. Let's start with drinking water. If you're on a municipal water system, follow their guidance on boil water or do not drink orders. But if you have a private well or spring and are in a flooded area, you should assume your water is contaminated. Don't drink or use your water for cooking, baby formula, washing food, or brushing teeth until you can have it tested. The health department is offering free test kits for anyone impacted by the flooding. These kits check for bacteria, nitrates, other chemicals, or contaminants. Please call our public health laboratory at 802-338-4724 or check our website, which also has this number, for more information that can be tailored to your particular situation. Boiling your water for 1 minute kills bacteria and other organisms. But don't use or boil water that's untested if it's cloudy, full of sediments, or smells like fuel or chemicals. Next, talk about water in the swimming and water safety capacity. Even once the skies have cleared, people and pets should stay out of any body of water after a heavy rain or flooding event. This has always been true, even in non-disaster circumstances. High water and strong undercurrents can linger and carry debris several days after a storm, making swimming or boating in these areas dangerous for anyone. Bodies of water may also be contaminated by microorganisms, fuel, and wastewater runoff. Swimming in contaminated areas can result in rashes, sore throats, diarrhea, or more serious problems from bacterial infection. So it's best to find another summer activity or place to cool off until waters are calm and cool again, especially in light of the fact that we have repeated rain events throughout this time period. Next, returning to your home. Wait until local officials say it's safe and standing water has gone down. Watch for any downed power lines, gas leaks, or damaged fuel tanks. If you smell natural gas, which smells like rotten eggs, or hear hissing, leave immediately and call your local utility. If electrical circuits and electrical equipment have gotten wet or are in or near water, turn off the power. If accessing the main power switch requires entering standing water, you should consult with an electrician. And never use a generator inside your home, basement, or garage, or less than 20 feet from any window, door, or vent. And if you're entering such an area and you have cuts or sustain any injuries with nails or the like, please remember to check your tetanus status and obtain a tetanus shot if that is due. Finally, cleaning your home, which I've seen a lot of efforts being conducted as we speak. First of all, we're not recommending anybody test for mold. If your home has been flooded and closed up for several days, you should assume your home has mold. So obviously you'll need to dry it out, opening doors and windows. You can use fans and dehumidifiers when electricity is safe. Children with breathing problems and people with weakened immune systems should not help clean up after a flood. Those who are helping should wear protective clothing. Time to get out again the N95 masks and gloves. You can clean moldy items and surfaces that do not absorb water using soap and water. But other materials like fabrics and cushions will probably need to be thrown away. You can find more information by visiting our website at healthvermont.gov/flood. Now, knowing that Secretary Tebbetts is up next, I'll leave the brunt of food safety for him, but I will leave you with this strong recommendation. Don't eat or drink anything that has touched floodwater. Throw away contaminated food, along with any foods that have not been refrigerated properly. When in doubt, throw it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Levine, and good morning, Vermonters. So here we are. We know the story. We've seen the images. We've witnessed the heartbreaking pictures of water tearing through our cities and our towns and villages, uprooting our roads and our bridges, flooding our farms, and destroying our crops. This tragic event follows closely on the heels of a hard freeze many of our farmers experienced in May. It's too early to fully describe or even estimate the damages, but it's clear the losses will be catastrophic, and our farmers, small businesses, and agriculture producers will need help. We expect the excessive flooding and silt will destroy a large share of our produce and livestock feed. In our hilly state, some of our most fertile farmland lies in the river valleys, and countless fields of corn, hay, vegetables, fruit, and pasture were swamped and buried. Vermont's growing season is short, and a historic flood in the heart of our limited window to grow food and crops is particularly devastating. Many crops cannot be replanted, and losses will not be effectively recovered or mitigated prior to our early fall harvest. Farming is challenging and rewarding, but heavy losses of agriculture products or feed will put many at risk. There is a ripple effect. The disruption to our farms may disrupt our regional food system and our food security. The widespread flooding we suffered throughout Vermont this week is among the worst of the last century, and it arrived in the heart of our growing season. So what's next? Farmers are already cleaning up, calculating their losses, and preparing for the fall and the winter. The work will not stop. We want our farmers, producers, and nurseries to document their losses. There will be a time we will need that information to present to our federal partners, including FEMA and the United States Department of Agriculture. Farmers should contact their insurance agent. We encourage our farmers to visit our webpage for any of our social media channels. We have put together a packet of resources that may help farmers navigate the many issues that they're facing. Again, that information can be found on the Agency of Agriculture's homepage. What can the public do? This is the time to support farmers. Maybe it's checking on your neighbors to see if they need a hand with a chore or an errand. Maybe it's attending a farmer's market or buying meat, cheese, or produce from a farm stand. Maybe it's hopping on the computer and buying a product so it's delivered in the mail. Or maybe you can donate to a fund that's focused on farmers. There are many. Farmers are rugged, hardworking, creative, darn tough, Governor, curious, and kind. They love their land, but they are hurting like the thousands of Vermonters who have lost their homes or businesses. Farmers feed us, and they will continue to feed us. Let's do our part to support them as we navigate this historic event with them. One of our strong partners has been the Agency of Transportation, who's helped restore many of our routes to support our farmers. I'm going to turn it over to Secretary Flynn for an update.
Thank you, Secretary Tebbets. AOT has had its first response-related injury. While driving a 10-wheel dump truck yesterday, a sinkhole opened up and the truck stopped dead in its tracks. I'm pleased to report that after the driver was evaluated at a local hospital, they returned to work, anxious to get back to the job at hand. More updates. As a result of the damage on Interstate 89 that occurred Monday, requiring us to close the interstate northbound, you will see some paving out there today, and there will be a temporary restriction to one lane northbound while the damaged pavement is repaired. The VTR, which is the Western Rail Corridor, should open later today, allowing the Amtrak Ethan Allen into Burlington tonight, with southbound passenger service restoring tomorrow morning. Currently across the state, AOT is working with 47 private contractors on our state road projects. That's an increase of 15 private contractors since we spoke yesterday. There remain 19 state roads fully closed. 9 roads are partially closed. And I would like to take a moment to share with you an enormous amount of effort over the last 48 hours of the following list of roads that have been reopened across the state of Vermont. Route 2 in Marshfield between Plainfield Village and Nasmith Brook Road. It is a gravel surface, so motorists must be prudent with their speed. Route 2 in Marshfield, just east of the village center. It too is gravel but passable. Route 2 in Duxbury between Vermont 100 and Vermont 100B. Route 2 in Waterbury near Fars Field. Route 2 in Middlesex near Lower Barnett Hill Road. Vermont 14 in Calais at Perkin-Brook Road is open but gravel. US 302 in Barry Town from Old Route 302 to the roundabout. US 302 in East Barry Road between Waterman Street and Messier Drive in the vicinity of the VFW. The Waterbury Park and Ride off Lincoln Street has reopened. Vermont 64 in Williamstown between Vermont 14 and I-89 has reopened. Vermont 12 in Brookfield near Baker's Pond no longer is being monitored and is open. Vermont 12 in Berlin near Rowell Hill Road also is no longer being monitored and is reopened. Vermont 12 in Hardwick at Bridge 66 is open to one lane. Vermont 12 in Roxbury, Warren Mountain Road to Granville Town Line has been reopened. And then Vermont 103 in Chester, Vermont 100 in Wardsboro to Jamaica, Vermont 107, Stockbridge to Bethel, Vermont 100 in Londonderry, Vermont 100 in Weston, Vermont 10 in Chester, Vermont 5 in Westminster, Vermont 66, Route 66 in Randolph, Vermont 4 in Woodstock, Vermont 110 in Tunbridge, Vermont 106 in Reading, Vermont 14 in Randolph, Vermont 14 in Randolph, Vermont 103, Gassets to Proctorville. There is alternating one-way traffic, but it is open. Ludlow south to Weston on Vermont 100 is open to emergency vehicles and limited local traffic. Plymouth, Vermont 100A has multiple slow zones, but open. Vermont 15 in Cambridge at the Wrong Way Bridge is now reopened. The intersection of Vermont 108 at Vermont 15, Jeff, reopened. Intersection of Vermont 108 and 109 has reopened. Vermont 2 at the Richmond exit 11 is reopened. Vermont 5, Coventry to Newport. Vermont 5, Barton to Orleans. Vermont 5, Depot Street in St. Johnsbury. Vermont 105 near Hilliker Store. Vermont 58, Orleans to Brownington. Vermont 16, Barton to Hardwick. Vermont 122 in Lindenville. Vermont 15 in Hardwick is open with traffic light control. And Vermont 232 is open to traffic and emergency one lane. Now, I remind you, this has all occurred in the last 48 hours. Much of it has been because Mother Nature has cooperated with receding water, but each and every one of these sites that I've just read have required that we visit them to assure that they're safe to open to the public. Our crews have been extremely busy, as has everybody. I would like to say also reinforcing what Commissioner Morrison mentioned about communities contacting the SEOC. Working with the SEOC in emergency management, AOT has been able to contact 228 towns. There are still 24 we have not been able to contact. Currently, AOT is assisting 15 towns. There was one new closure last night as a result of the rain, Vermont 346 in Pownell. Actually, that's a result of trees and utilities across the road. Vermont 155 in Mount Holly is a result of the rainstorm last night. A deep culvert washout has failed. There has also been a large bank slide and erosion on Vermont 100 in Washington. Currently, our geotech team is out there today planning on what the fix for that will be. 40 bridges were inspected yesterday across the state, local and state-owned bridges. To date, 121 bridges have been inspected. 6 rail bridges were inspected yesterday. 4 of them were on the line through Barre and Montpelier, referred to as the Little Whacker. There still are some rail bridges that are difficult to get to, and inspections still need to be conducted. Some updates on some roads. Bridge 116 in Bridgewater on Vermont 100, in the area the governor and I visited on Saturday, which was a result of the Friday storm, will have a temporary bridge installed tonight, but it will not be open to the public until we finish the work of the approaches to the bridge. But the big effort was to get the bridge brought in from Brattleboro and get it put in place. One town highway bridge structure in Jamaica on Route 30 has been closed due to being compromised. We are currently in conversations with the town of Jamaica on plans for the way forward regarding that structure. Rail. 306 miles of rail remain closed. 103 miles of rail have reopened in the last 24 hours. I would like to just say, too, most Vermonters don't see the work that's going on railroads because they're often off in the middle of nowhere. But the effort that's been put into reestablishing the rail lines amongst our partners with Vermont Rail Systems and contractors working on those lines, among other things, are enabling Amtrak to get back into Burlington tonight. The Green Mountain Railroad in East Wallingford does have a large slope failure, and frankly, it's getting worse. There's a lot of work left to do on that line between Rutland and Bellows Falls. The Connecticut River line, which runs the eastern side of the state up to Newport, is now fully open. And as I mentioned, the Little Whacker between Barre and Montpelier a moment ago, there is some very severe damage on that line, and planning continues for the way forward there. The 10 state-owned airports are operational. There are no impacts, and the 2 AOT-owned dams have no issues at this time. Thank you.
Thank you all. We'll open up to questions.
Sorry, Governor, the IRS put out a statement this morning saying that they're extending the filing deadline for tax filers, businesses, and individuals. Does the state have any plans to do the same?
Oh, we'll be working on that. I think that was for maybe their quarterly filings, but I'm not sure. The quarterlies were in June, I believe, so this is probably in September. So we have a little bit of time to figure that out, but we'll obviously react accordingly and do everything we can to reduce the burden on impacted Vermonters.
You know, along those lines, I had some store owners in Montpelier ask me yesterday if the state was considering delaying their collection of sales tax by the end of the month, so that was money they could use to help with their recovery. Is that something that's
It's all in the mix. I mean, we don't know what we're going to do, but we are certainly aware of the impacts on businesses, and we want to do anything we can to alleviate that. So that's part of one of our discussions.
Unemployment filings. Number one, I mean, at what point do people qualify for unemployment? Like if they can't get to work, if their car is, unusable. And have you seen any uptick in filing?
I'm not aware of the uptick at this point in time, but it's anticipated. There are a number of people who can't get to work, where their businesses are closed. So we fully anticipate, and we're preparing for that, the arrival of many who will be filing for claims. So we're working on that as we speak.
Is there anything the state can do to prevent employers from firing people if they can't get to work?
I believe there is. I would have a hard time believing that anyone would do that, especially with the workforce challenges we face. We need every single employee we have. I can't imagine any employer doing that. But obviously we will react accordingly.
For those employees who are working, who have been working at downtown businesses across the state, who now there's just a huge recovery cleanup effort, is their main recourse for the next few weeks unemployment, or is there FEMA money that covers salaries? How does that work?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. Thankfully, we have a couple of FEMA representatives here. I don't know if you are prepared to answer anything like that, but please come up and identify yourself.
Good morning. I'm Sam Harvey. I work with FEMA on the individual assistance side. Yes, there is the approval for disaster unemployment assistance, which is a grant from FEMA to the state to help with anybody who, because of the disaster, lost wages or lost employment. They would apply through the Vermont Department of Labor and go through that process.
So that's a separate fund that's set up for them?
Correct.
So when will individuals be able to apply for individual assistance? What will that look like, and how much can people receive potentially?
Sure. So for those that were impacted, that had uninsured disaster losses, they can apply for FEMA assistance as early as today, now that the declaration has been approved. We'll continue to roll out those programs, but they can call 1-800-621-FEMA, 1-800-621-3362, go to disasterassistance.gov, or interact with one of our disaster survivor assistance operators in the field to apply. That will start the process going. Each individual will have a different time frame and path forward based on their situation and what they're able to provide. And each individual, based again on their scenario, will have availability to different funds for home repair, for temporary housing, and for loss to personal property.
Is there a deadline to apply? Is there a certain window to apply by?
Yes, right now there's going to be a 30-day deadline. That clock will start ticking today since the declaration just came down.
When Administrator Criswell was here earlier in the week, she said to Vermonters, don't wait to fix things. Get them done now. Take pictures. Worry about FEMA reimbursement later. Is that still the operative message?
Yes, that is still accurate. I would not encourage anybody to delay any repairs, necessary repairs. When our FEMA inspectors go out to look at the property, they are trained to identify what has been repaired, anything that may have been impacted by the storm.
I know that FEMA is able to provide, I think it's a $700 emergency check to those people. Can you explain to us a little bit more about how you get that, how quickly it can come?
Sure. I believe what you're referring to is critical needs assistance. That's part of the assistance that would potentially be available as a survivor applies. So the same process applies, and then based on the information that they provide, their unique situation, they could potentially be eligible for that assistance.
Okay. And what can that be used for?
It's intended to be used for any critical needs. So that could be for loss to food, loss to they had to pay for a hotel room out of pocket. Any of those things that are required in the interim just to get them through.
Will people need to provide their receipts to prove what they used it for? Is there any kind of check on that?
It's always advisable to save receipts and to have those available. Depending on exactly what they're reported as losses, There may be requests for verification of it, but it'll depend on each survivor's situation.
And for the $700 check and then the other assistance that people may qualify for, is that taxable?
It is not. It is a grant.
Okay. Calvin asked about the dollar amounts that people can get. My understanding it's about $41,000 for damage to a home and then $41,000 other needs that they might have. Am I correct?
That's correct. There are 3 distinct categories. Housing repair for homeowners that have to make repair to drywall, to carpet and such. Rental assistance for those that have to be displaced from their home, and personal property for their clothing and home furnishings. Each one of those has a cap of $41,000. Although I would encourage that it's dependent upon unique situations, so I would not look at that as a target for what any individual could necessarily expect.
We've got some folks on the phone, so I'm going to go there and then we come back to the room. We'll start with Bob Audette, Brattleboro Reformer.
Thank you. I don't have any questions right now.
Thank you, Bob. Let's try Keith, Rutland Herald.
Hi. Has anyone checked on or is monitoring the health and welfare of our unhoused population?
They are being treated just like everyone else at this point, Keith. If they are unhoused and need assistance, they should also call 211, and we're there for them as well.
Thank you.
Derek, 7 days.
Yes, thank you. Has the state been able to assess the scope of the damage to mobile home parks around the state? Do you know how many have been damaged? Has there been state or federal level outreach to the parks that are affected?
Yeah, we are aware of some mobile home parks, and we are looking into those at this point in time. And in fact, there was one we visited 2 days ago in Barrie that was heavily impacted again from the storm. Is there anybody here who might be able to speak to that? Yeah, Commissioner Morrison had to leave. We'll get back to you on that and give you a report on that tomorrow. But I have been concerned about our mobile home parks because I was I was involved, I guess, during Irene with many of the mobile home parks throughout the state. In fact, a lot of the deconstruction, recycling, and so forth was done by a team I put together. So we are very aware of that situation.
Thanks. I had one other question. I was hoping to get a little bit more clarity on those 24 or so towns that were mentioned as not having had contact with state officials yet. Are those towns, or any of those towns, in areas of the state that were known to be affected by the floods? And when you say the National Guard will be deployed to those places, what will that look like?
Yeah, we'll have a liaison from the National Guard go into the communities just to make sure that we're talking to them face to face, without an email, without a phone call, and so forth. We don't want to wait for that. Obviously, something's being missed, so we want to be sure that we have this contact, so we know what the needs are of the communities. Because if they don't contact us, we don't always know, and so that's what we're trying to alleviate. Do you know the? Sure. Okay, Secretary Flynn.
From the AOT perspective, the majority of those towns that I mentioned are in northwestern Vermont, where there was much less impact from this event than the rest of the state. So we would call that our District 5 and our District 8 garages in the towns in that area. Probably just because they don't have a lot to tell us. But we're not relying on that. We're going to continue to try to assure we have contact.
Thank you.
Joseph Gresser, Brattleboro Chronicle.
If that's okay. Up here in Orleans County, there are many people who are concerned about the safety of the Casella landfill all the time. was there any special attention given to things like potential runoff or other problems that might have resulted strictly from the heavy rainfall?
First of all, Joe, I know you're from Barton, so there's an inspection process at the landfills on a daily basis. So anything, any slides, any deviation from normal operating procedures are identified and repaired every single day. So I would imagine that's still the case. Okay. Deputy Secretary Gendron just said that that is the case. So we are not aware of anything, but they're inspected every single day.
Thank you. I have one other question. I was visiting an organization that had a lithium battery powered snowblower, which they took out of a flooded basement and came back the next day to find in ashes. Is this something that people should be aware of?
At this point in time, I don't know if we can answer that, and we'll certainly look into it and get back to you and maybe identify that as an issue. But I'm not prepared to answer it right here from the podium. So give us an opportunity to look into it, and then we'll assess that.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Jeb, News 10, and if you could just speak up on the phone. Jeb? All right, we'll go back to the room.
Question about ag. Do you know how much milk has been dumped? I gather from the website that is a concern. Any sense of how much and what's been done about it?
Just a little background, as many of you know, cows have to be milked twice a day, and then it's gone into a holding tank for storage. And pickup could be, depending on the size of the farm, could be every day or could be every other day. So there's not a lot of capacity to keep the milk cool on the farm. It has to be transported to the creamery to be processed into cheese or butter, yogurt, etc. So when we had a number of roads that washed out and collapsed, that put a real strain on our transportation system and picking up the milk. So it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be. There's still pockets of it. Of course, a gallon of milk that you have to throw away is a sad day for a farmer. That's the revenue stream for a farm, and it's also a loss because that's turned into valuable product to feed us. So there has been some great work done by transportation in identifying some areas that priority, particularly Route 2. There was a lot of the creamery in Cabot. Getting that milk there was very, very important. Route 2 is open again, so that milk is making its way to the creamery there. We still have some pockets in the hills, some of these back roads. We have some incredible stories from farmers themselves fixing roads. Town of Cabot, a farmer up there got his tractor together, and these are the stories you're going to see all across the state of Vermont. People just doing the work that needs to be done. He got his tractor together. He's been repairing roads along with the town crew in Cabot, and that meant that his milk could be picked up and taken to the creamery. But still some pockets out there, but it's better than we thought it was going to be.
You mentioned the frost. What are we looking at? I know it's early, but for the long-term impact on farm viability in Vermont with these two major events?
Well, it's too early to tell, but I know there's a lot of discussions going on. Some of these farmers went through this during Irene, like a lot of Vermonters went through this. Now they've gone through it again. 12 years is it, I think. So there's going to be a lot of discussions of what to do. We're prepared at the agency to work with, particularly, I think one area that we got to work on is the produce section. I think the produce farmers This came at the worst time for them. Much of their crop was coming in at this time. We have a very short growing season. There may be not enough time to replant. There may be some cases they can replant and get another crop. So there's a lot of discussions going on, and a lot of farmers probably pretty discouraged right now. But now we've got to evaluate the losses, try to get them as much support as we can, and have discussions with them to prepare for the late summer and fall and into winter.
Secretary, have you received reports of any animal fatalities?
I have not received any. That does not mean there have not been some. But I think farmers are pretty careful about taking care of their animals and getting them to where they need to go. Now there may have been, but I have not received any big reports of losses for livestock.
If let's say a dairy farmer, for instance, if their fields are flooded and their cows can't graze or they can't make hay, I mean, what are they to do?
A couple of things we're encouraging farmers to do. There's going to be some testing done on the soil. So we're working closely with UVM Extension, and Dr. Heather Darby is an expert, and she's been visiting farmers, looking at what to do with the corn crop. There's a little debate whether the corn can be saved or not. Unlike Irene, it was too late in the season and may have lost. There may be a chance that some corn can be salvaged. And on the hay side, I think we're going to have a hay issue. I think we're going to have an issue with a lot of hay that's been destroyed that maybe cannot be salvaged. So we're going to be testing both, the crops to see if they're okay, and we're also going to be testing the soil between our lab and UVM Extension. That's the plan.
You brought up the May freeze. Have you heard an update from the feds about the disaster declaration request?
We have not. We have heard from USDA that if we're going to get direct payments to those that were impacted by the freeze, Congress is going to have to allocate some money for that. We believe the loss for our growers was about $10 million during the May freeze. So we have heard from USDA. They do have existing programs but most of those are loans, not direct payments. But if we're going to get any direct payments to those that suffered loss during the May freeze, Congress is going to have to appropriate a special money for them.
Would that be in the Farm Bill or the budget negotiations?
It could. There's a number of vehicles. There's some discussion in Washington. There are a lot of disasters that have happened over the United States over the last year, and sometimes they put together a special appropriation just for natural disasters related to agriculture. We think that may be a vehicle, but we're in close contact with our delegation. The other thing is the region has been impacted, so we've had, Connecticut was reaching out last night. Massachusetts was involved in this flood as well. So it's just not a Vermont issue. New York was impacted. As a region, we've had some serious farm issues, both on the frost and on the flood, which may benefit us as we seek federal aid.
Will you seek another USDA disaster?
We're looking into that. We're under discussion. Maybe the overall FEMA one that the president has given us may be enough, but we're prepared to file one in case we need an additional one and get that to the governor for his signature to present it to the United States Department of Agriculture.
This is a super bleak question, but you mentioned that this was a regional event and a lot of crops have been damaged. And as the climate warms and severe weather events continue to happen, are you concerned about long-term food security?
I think we're always concerned about that. That's sometimes we forget about when farmers sometimes are criticized for whatever some practice or what they do, but in the end they're feeding us. I think Vermont is in a good spot without these natural disasters. We can produce a lot of great food for the region. We can produce more, but it's challenging. The price point to the farmer is always a challenge. We've got a national system. We probably should have a regional system, but a lot of people are working on that. Vermont can produce a lot of great food for Boston and New York and the Northeast. They just need to have that system supported, but it's very complicated. Everything from transportation to getting it to market and getting a return to the farmer that's fair.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
If the feds are able to provide relief, I'm wondering, is there a difference in how non-food producers can receive relief? I'm thinking of there's in particular a flower farmer that I've seen whose entire stock has been demolished.
Yeah, those we have concern for our nurseries, our flower farmers. We also should not forget about our loggers as well. It's been a very, very, I'm working with Forest Parks and Recreation as well, because our loggers, it's been so wet, they have not been able to get into the woods to cut trees, but now they've not been able to get those logs out of the woods and get them to the mills to be processed as well. So that's a pocket that, as we discuss this overall recovery, we're always partnering with our logging industry as well, because they're an important part of our landscape and our rural economy.
Time for maybe one or two more.
I just had a question about housing. Governor, as you know, there's a pretty significant chunk of our housing that's been temporarily at least knocked offline. We've got people in shelters. What do you see as the medium to long-term vision of how this storm will affect what's already a really tight housing market?
Yeah, obviously we knew that there was a housing crisis. We've known that for a number of years. A number of people, leaders, legislative leaders have characterized that as a crisis, and this just further burdens that. So it's not lost on us. We're going to be doing all we can during this situation to, again, further the replacement of housing and to build upon that. So we'll continue to work on that.
And have you been in contact with lawmakers, the pro tem, the speaker, about whether it be housing or anything else, that there's questions that this storm might have arose that we might need to tackle in a legislative session or a special session?
Yeah, I mean, considering it's been 4 days, we are taking care of the response right now, but those recovery, our teams in ACCD are already working on that, and we'll be in conversations with the legislature to see if there's anything that we should do. But again, we know this was an issue before the legislative session. For the last five years, it's been an issue, and this further impacts that. And so we will continue to do all we can to work on that and to alleviate that.
Could you give us a quick update on what you expect now is going to happen on, is it Sunday night and early Monday morning, and how the state is preparing for that possibility?
Yeah, again, we're asking Vermonters to be vigilant, be prepared. We don't know the extent of some of these storms. There's one on Sunday, another one on Tuesday, and then it appears that we're just going back into our pattern of almost every other day of rain. But we haven't heard about the intensity or the severity of these storms at this point in time. But to be honest, we didn't know 3 days ago about this one that we experienced last night. So again, we will continue to monitor. We'll continue to listen to the experts, and we'll continue to communicate with all of you so that you can communicate with your listeners, so that we be prepared if and when there's another event. But again, at this point, we're in pretty good shape. The streams and rivers are receding. That's good news. The reservoirs and dams, we're seeing that level recede, so we have some storage capacity, and that's the important part. So what we experienced again with this weather event was 3 days of intense rain. If we can get a few breaks here, we'll be able to have that storage capacity. We may have the flash flooding, but we'll have the storage capacity so that we can so that it wouldn't impact our downtowns quite as much as it did this time.
So the past couple days, there's kind of been a keen watch on dams. So now that river levels will hopefully kind of be going down, is there any type of assessment or inspection process going forward over the next 1 or 2 weeks with Wrightsville, PG, dams across the state?
All of them. We continue to monitor them, and we'll continue to see if there's any damage. We were concerned about the Quechee situation. It appears we're okay there for at least now, but we continue to monitor each and every one of them.
Could we get Dr. Levine back up? Thank you for being so generous and for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm wondering if the department is at all bracing for an uptick in airborne illnesses, specifically COVID, with people in shelters in tight proximity.
Yeah, fortunately, respiratory infections are less common in the summer. So most of the viruses are not major players, and people are not congregated indoors most of the time. COVID levels have not really been altered at the present time. It's obviously very early in the experience, but we're not seeing the kind of summertime surges we've seen in other summers during the pandemic, which is a great thing. But obviously we continue to do surveillance on all of these conditions, COVID specifically. People should also understand, the healthcare system is up and running, and it's had its challenges as a result of the floods, but the reality is almost 100% of both inpatient and outpatient facilities are open. Our substance use disorder treatment system is open. Things are actually available for any Vermonter in need.
Has there been any increase in people coming into hospital doctor's offices for water intake illnesses? Like, I guess like food poisoning if they're drinking bad water?
Yeah, so have not heard that as of yet. Obviously, this is still very early in the experience. We will know if that occurs, but I've not heard that yet.
What about illnesses from coming into contact with blood water, like hepatitis or hepatitis?
Yeah, those are the kinds of things I was cautioning people about in my comments. Again, I think that's a little early in the response yet, too, to understand if that's been an issue for people. But wearing all of the protective equipment we talked about and taking great care in those environments is really the key.
Has there been any staffing issues at hospitals, pharmacies, doctor's offices?
So staffing issues, some of the hospitals were concerned about staffing issues, mostly because of transportation issues, not illness issues. I've not heard that any have gone to a critical level, and they're all making do with the staff that they have at this time.
And any delays in medication shipments?
Not that I've been informed of.
Okay.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.